Risky behavior.
The views and opinions expressed on this channel are solely those of the host and guest and are intended for entertainment and discussion purposes only. This channel does not promote bias, hatred, or discrimination of any kind. All questions posed and thoughts shared are part of a critical thinking exercise and are not meant to offend or judge any individual or group. We encourage respectful dialogue and love for all. Please remember to think critically and engage thoughtfully. We aim to foster a positive and inclusive community where everyone feels welcome. Thank you for being a part of Risky Behavior ENT.
Risky behavior.
Boom, boom. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. And because it's Sunday, I'm doing the Diabolical Risky News. And I want to talk about the pastor's son who keeps bodies in the basement. They say it's always the pastor's kid. Now, welcome back to Risky Behavior ENT, where we don't just talk about what happened, we dissect why it happened. Now, I am your host, Mr. Diabolical himself, and today's episode is not for the faint of heart. We're diving deep into the twisted case of Donnie Ray Birchfield Jr., a man who allegedly turned his basement into a prison, holding 4 vulnerable adults captive for years. That's until one of them died. And here's the kicker. He's the son of a Baptist pastor. This isn't just a crime. It's a betrayal of trust, faith, and humanity. Now, before we get into the story, I want to encourage you to thumbs up, like the video. It is the free way that you can support the content creators. If you like the content, feel free to subscribe and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Don't forget to share. Or just after you listen to the video, get into the comment section. Let me know what you thought about it. If you're meeting up with any family this Sunday, bring this case up, man. See what your family and your friends think about it. All righty. Let's go ahead and get into this. Let's get it started. All right. All right. It all started with a call about an unattended death in Lancaster, South Carolina. Police arrived at Birchfield's home and found one woman dead in the basement. But she wasn't alone. 3 others were discovered, alive, but allegedly held against their will. Now, according to this video I have on the screen titled "She Died in the Basement, The Shocking Case of Donnie," the woman's death had occurred the day before, but Birchfield didn't report it until the next day. That delay. Now that was the first red flag.
Imagine dying in a basement where you have been held captive while your abuser stole your money and controlled every part of your life. Sounds crazy. Sounds made up. Y'all know I don't make this stuff up. So here we go. Donnie Ray Birchfield Jr., age 35, of Lancaster, South Carolina, was arrested on August 1st, 2025, after police discovered that he had allegedly kept 4 vulnerable adults captive in his basement for up to a decade while stealing their money. Authorities were initially called to his home, located on Churchill Drive, in July 2025 for an unattended death of one of the victims, a woman who reportedly lived in the basement with her husband. Police said that during the investigation, detectives learned that Birchfield was alleged to have been caring for several people in his basement and using their funds for his own financial gain. Here's a picture of Donnie Ray.
Ooh. I ain't gonna lie. Looking at that picture, I ain't surprised at all.
Now, according to police and warrants reviewed by a Charleston newspaper called the Post and Courier, Birchfield allegedly, controlled the victims' lives, such as when they could eat, when they could use the bathroom, and he also denied them medical treatment. He withheld at least 2 bank cards from the adults and at least one account number from one of the victims. And again, he used the victim's funds for his own benefit. It's also alleged from evidence that the woman who died in the basement had been physically abused. Damn. He also cut the victims off from the outside world, even taking control of their cell phones. The other 2 victims were females, and reportedly they were in romantic relationship with Birchfield. It's alleged that one of these females had lived there in the home since September of 2024, and the other had been there since 2015. I wonder what that lady from last September thought when she got down in that basement. Now, here's a picture of Donnie Ray's home. And yeah, I would not approach that house. I'm glad I don't have a job that I have to go door to door to folks' homes, because good grief. Birchfield faces multiple charges, including 4 counts of false imprisonment, 4 counts of exploitation of a vulnerable adult, 2 counts of abuse of a vulnerable adult, and 2 counts of domestic violence and financial charges. He is being held on a $150,000 bond at the Lancaster County Detention Center in South Carolina. Here's a picture of the outside of that detention center. Now, here's my questions. If these adults were held captive for so long, what do you think they could have done to help themselves get out sooner? And do you think that $150,000 bond is enough for charges as serious? Finally, what punishment do you believe would fit this case if he's found guilty? Now, my reminders.
Well, my answer is I think the bond, I think that is too low. I don't think he should have the option. Imagine how messed up the system is. A guy charged with holding people against their will. So you get to hold people against their will, but then you get the opportunity to be free if you can afford it. And as far as the people setting themselves free, I think people like this, they choose people that they know they could easily overpower. I don't think they would pick somebody that they think would give them a fight. So hey, that's what they do. That's why they're predators. That's what they do. They cheat to win. They ain't picking nobody that they think can overpower them. It's something about that person that they feel like, yeah, I could take them.
1, keep demanding release of those documents, and you know which ones I'm talking about. 2, the No Kings Music Festival is coming up on October 18th, 2025. Go to their website, nokings.org, for more information. And 3, keep your eyes on the prize. The prize is the White House and democracy in America. Do not get distracted by the foolishness, mayhem, debauchery, and lies coming out of this administration. If you like this video or if you learned anything, hit all 4 of the buttons on the right side in TikTok and like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. All of that engagement helps me out immensely. I greatly appreciate it, and I thank you in advance for doing it. Leave those comments. Let me know what you're thinking about this case. And thank you for watching, and have a great day.
Okay. Shout out to Buffy's flavorful journey. Feel free to go over to that channel and subscribe. She threw some political views there at the end, but I don't discuss my political views publicly at all. Yeah, just don't. I don't do it. I don't do it. I don't do it. I don't do it. Let's see. Oh, I didn't even subscribe. I subscribe because I used a video. I don't want to be rude. Okay, dokie. Moving right along. Okay. Now let's talk about the captives. Okay. Now, who were these victims? And in my ear. Who were the victims? Two women Birchfield had romantic ties with, one dating back to 2015, and a married couple he was supposedly caring for. But care is not what they receive. I'm about to put up another video titled South Carolina Man Accused of Holding Vulnerable Adults in His Basement. Reports that this video reports that Birchfield controlled when they could eat, use the bathroom, or contact loved ones. One woman said she hadn't been allowed to leave since 2015. That's a decade of captivity. That is a long time to be up in somebody's basement. And I can understand people's when they had a thought like, come on, man, since 2015, it's 2025, man, you ain't figured out a way. Like, did he never leave the house? Did he keep him doped up? Did he have him like chained to a pole in the basement or something like that? Like, how you couldn't? That's a long time. Like, I'm hoping that they because I haven't even looked over everything. I kind of like to not look over everything because I want to have a fresh reaction when I'm hearing this stuff. But it's like there was no like attempt for escape. Like, that's a long time, 10 years, man. But I don't know. I've seen worse things. I remember I did a news story on this young there was this white guy, right? And his stepmom had kept him captive in his bedroom, and he was there for years. He was malnourished, he was way underweight, and you know how he got free? He finally got free as a grown man. He had been in there since a little boy. As a grown man is when he finally got free. And what he did was he set a fire in his room to get the fire department to come there and get the police to come there so he could finally be free. But he was in there way over actually he was there for 2 decades, man. 2 decades in his room. She would bring him outside of the house into the backyard every now and then, you know, to stretch his legs and get some air and get some sun. And there was people that reported saying and it was so crazy. The way they described when they saw him was like a person who brings their dog outside to walk their dog. Like, they would see him in the backyard, but like she or the father, because his dad was still around. His dad was alive at the time. By the time he got free, the father had died. And so it was just the stepmother still around. But for years, the stepmom and the father was still alive. And the way they described them having him in the backyard and kind of like you could tell they was watching him, the way people described it sounded like somebody walking their pet or something like that. That's how they treated him. And a lot of people would say they treated him worse than somebody would do a pet. But yeah, man, it's a crazy world. You would never think. And I know in that last video, that lady said, like, oh, I wouldn't go in the house, man. But when you be looking at these houses in these neighborhoods, man, that's insane to me. I don't know if anybody else has that thought, but it always just kind of bothers me is that you just never know. You could be driving down any street in the world, past anybody's house in the world, and not know the horror, just the diabolical shit that's going on in that house, man. Like, that's insane to me to just think about that. You could just be driving down the street, you playing your music, you ain't thinking about nothing. You driving past a house, somebody in there being tortured and held in the basement.
Lancaster police responded to an unattended death on July 25th at a home on Churchill Drive, and according to reports, learned that Birchfield was keeping multiple people in his basement. Birchfield is facing 4 counts of false imprisonment. Warrants obtained by WBTV say that he was the sole caregiver of a man in
let's see, in case they don't read them all out. Charges brought against Donnie Birchfield Jr. 4 counts of exploitation of a vulnerable adult, 4 counts of false imprisonment, 2 counts of domestic violence, high and aggravated nature, 2 counts of abuse of a vulnerable adult, 2 counts of financial transaction card theft, 1 count of transaction card fraud, one count of financial identity fraud. Man, they say his father was a pastor, man. I say he said he got to get him money another way. He ain't waiting on the collection plate.
A woman, and says that he denied them access to sustenance, medical needs, and communication, and wouldn't allow them to leave, keeping them both in the basement. The warrants also described two intimate relationships, one over the course of nearly a year and the other over the course of nearly 10 years. Reports say Birchfield would routinely assault the victims, control what they did, and didn't allow them to leave the home. One warrant even says that Birchfield told the victim that he was, quote, going to kill her, and that he, quote, knows how to get rid of a body from past experience. I reached out to Birchfield's attorney, M. Ryan Payne, who says in part, quote, my client maintains his innocence in this case. I also reached out to neighbors who told us off camera that they wouldn't have guessed something like this would happen in their neighborhood. I spoke with the co-founder of the nonprofit Cleveland Missing, whose other co-founder, Gina DeJesus, was one of 3 women who survived the Ariel Castro kidnappings in Cleveland in 2013.
I would rather have a neighbor be upset with me that maybe I said something that perhaps wasn't accurate than what if somebody was there.
She says it's important to give victims space afterwards.
So really allowing people to reacclimate back into whatever light that they were taken from. And I would say honor that and respect that. You can still love on them and care about them. And I would say the community should do that.
Oh man, let's see. Another thing I'm thinking about, I'm about to see if I can find it real quick because I'm gonna see if they mention it. Give me a second, huh? All right. See, they say as of now, Donnie Ray Birchfield Jr.'s height has not been publicly disclosed in any official records or news reports related to the case. That's what I was wondering too. Sometimes you got to take into account. Sometimes, like when we're looking at cases like this, you're like, how could this person hold these people hostage and stuff? And then when you think that, but you have to consider sometimes they're taking advantage of people that are not able to defend themselves. Like the married couple, they say you're supposed to be taking care of them. You know, sometimes people have different handicaps and things. And then I was wondering how tall he is because sometimes these people, these be big guys, very, obviously, somebody's over 6 feet something, big, heavy, they're usually able to overpower most people. Then you add the fact that he's taking advantage of people that are weaker than him, smaller than him, and they might have health issues that add to that. But I was wondering if I could find it because I was like, when I'm thinking about like being able to hold somebody for that long, I'm like, yeah, I can't find it. It don't say nothing about his height or anything like that. Okay. Whew. Now let's talk evidence. Birchfield allegedly used the victim's money for personal gain, over $12,000 spent on Walmart purchases and credit card bills. According to the video I'm about to play next, titled Pastor's Son Held 4 People Captive in Basement for Years, he withheld bank cards and account numbers, effectively cutting them off financially. One victim was reportedly choked until she lost consciousness. These aren't just allegations, there are patterns of control, abuse, and exploitation. All right, so next video I'm about to play is from one of my favorite channels. It's the Law and Crime Network. Man, I encourage everybody all the time, man. Just subscribe to that channel, man. You get all the news you need. Like all the news you need. Look at this creepy looking guy right here. Even the dog don't even look like. The dog don't look like, I don't know if that's a boy or girl dog. The dog don't even want him to hold him. How could this guy? I don't know. Seeing people on pictures and in real life do be different. I just don't see myself following somebody that look like that into a basement. I'm not trying to be funny or nothing like that. It's just you got to put yourself in the mind of a person. Some people just really be at a point in their life where they really need help. They be in desperate situations, and so their guard be down. You know, that's what I'm saying. Not like trying to say those people are stupid or anything like that, but a lot of times people guard be down, and somebody like him can take advantage of that.
Son now accused of confining 4 people in their own hell in his basement. Authorities say he held 4 people against their will, beating them and strangling them inside his home, in some cases for as long as a decade. Police say they found out about the alleged house of horror because one of the people allegedly held captive died. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. When I read the headline to this story, I had to read it twice because it was so shocking, so disturbing. And it's the kind of story where you just can't comprehend that something like this could allegedly happen. But police in Lancaster, South Carolina say these allegations are very real. And they center around the man you see here. His name is Donnie Ray Birchfield Jr. He's now under arrest. He's facing several charges. I'll tell you about those in just a moment. Law enforcement has told us, by the way, that more charges could be coming pending the outcome of an investigation that is still ongoing. So let's go back to when police first discovered what was allegedly happening inside Birchfield's home. The story begins on July 25th. Police in Lancaster, South Carolina, it's about an hour south of Charlotte, they got a call about an unattended death inside Birchfield's home. According to warrants obtained by the Post and Courier media outlet, police determined that the woman who had died inside that house had died actually a day prior to them showing up at Birchfield's home. They say there was also evidence that the woman was physically denied food, water, and medical treatment. This was just the beginning of what law enforcement allegedly found on Birchfield. There were also 3 other people inside this house, and police say they were allegedly being held captive by Birchfield. Now, we found several pictures of Birchfield on social media. It's of him and his family. And in many ways, it appears that he was continuing to live his life publicly as all of this allegedly was happening behind the door of his home. The newspaper also reports that the woman who died had a husband and he was being held captive inside Birchfield's home. There were
This is what I'm saying. I can't see a picture. I can't find out one picture where this dude don't look like he would do something like this.
2 more people, a total of 4 people allegedly being held captive. The other 2 were women, police say, who Birchfield was in a relationship with. Police said for the husband and wife, Birchfield was the sole provider for them. It's unclear at this point who they are, and it's unclear how Birchfield knew them. Now, as far as the 2 women who were allegedly in some kind of romantic relationship with Birchfield, police say one had moved into the house in September of last year. The other, get this, had been in the home, police say, since 2015. We are talking a decade. Now on Facebook, again, we see Birchfield in pictures seemingly looking like someone who lived a normal life. And there is a woman kept the 4 in his basement, and they were only allowed to leave when he let them. Birchfield also controlled the victims' cell phones, police say. He stopped them from calling for help. He also allegedly controlled when the victims would eat and when they would use the bathroom. Physically, police say Birchfield abused the victims, including by strangling them. One woman allegedly told police that Birchfield threatened to kill her and her family, and that he said he knew how to get rid of a body from past experience. Then, since 2021, police allege that Birchfield used the couple's credit card and debit card to pay for at least $2,000 to buy items online from Walmart. There were 32 transactions, in fact, and police say they were all for Birchfield. And financially, he wasn't done because he also allegedly spent nearly $12,000 of that couple's money over the first 8 months of this year, and that was to pay off multiple credit cards. You might be wondering, What kind of monster is this? Well, a member of his family is pushing back on these allegations, calling them gossip. I'll tell you what she had to say in just a moment. What we do know about Birchfield, again, you saw a lot of pictures with him and his family. It appears that he is the son of a Baptist pastor in Lancaster, South Carolina. It also appears he's just a huge fan of professional wrestling. His social media shows him with several wrestlers, and this one in some ways is sadly ironic because you can see a chain around Birchfield's neck. What he's accused of course, in this story, it's not just some gimmick or storyline. This is very real. And again, someone died. And the question is, will he face charges for that? Police say the investigation is ongoing. Now, as far as at least one person who may be in his corner on social media is his sister, because she posted on Facebook, quote, "Before you share or repost anything about my family, please stop and put yourself in our place. What if it were your son, your brother, or your friend being gossiped about and judged online? Spreading speculation, repeating unverified claims, and adding commentary only causes more harm. It's not helping anyone." Now, look, it is true that we have not heard Birchfield's side of the story. And if there's any chance that all of this is some big misunderstanding, certainly we'll wait and hear what his side will be. It's also unclear how the woman in his home died. We're still waiting for a cause of death from authorities, and it's unclear how someone could allegedly be held captive in at least one case for a decade and for no one to know about it until over the summer when Birchfield was arrested. When we talked to law enforcement, they said that more charges are potentially coming as this investigation continues on, and it is a very complicated investigation. Birchfield's currently facing 16 charges. There's 2 counts of abuse of a vulnerable adult, 4 counts of false imprisonment, 2 counts of domestic violence, high and aggravated nature, financial transaction card fraud, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, 2 counts of financial transaction card theft, identity fraud, and 3 counts of exploitation of a vulnerable adult. He's being held on a $150,000 bond. Joining us now to talk more about this is former sheriff's deputy and former SWAT team member Chad Ayers. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us. This is a disturbing case, to say the least. I guess just what do you take away from what we've read thus far?
That's one thing that I do like about Law and Crime. They usually like always bring a professional on, which I think is a nice touch. You know what I mean? Just always great. Usually, too, they'll bring a lawyer in, and I like when they bring the lawyer in too, because the lawyer will say, hey, if you had to defend this person, how might this person try to defend themselves in this case? And I like that part because it kind of lets you know what to look for, you know, when this case starts. What kind of defense will this person come with?
No, Chris, it's great to join you again, as always. First and foremost, psychopath, and how embarrassing it is that this is actually taking place or took place in my own state of South Carolina. Honestly, Chris, it took me back to several years ago where a gentleman by the name of Todd Colehep, I'm sure many of you remember this case, same type of situation, except he was actually charged with several high-profile murders in the upstate, but he had kept people captive in Connex boxes. Again, not exactly the same thing, but same type of just sick mentality. But obviously, we got a lot of questions, and obviously, as this investigation continues to play out and more information comes, I think it's going to shed a lot of light on the background of this sick individual.
We typed Donnie Birchfield's name into truthfinder.com, and we saw the address that police say these horrific crimes allegedly happened in. We use Truthfinder to learn more about the people involved in our stories. They can give you criminal background checks as well as known addresses so you can understand someone better. But even if you don't work in true crime, Truthfinder can be a great resource to give you some peace of mind, as it's one of the largest public record search services in the United States. And with the paid subscription service, you get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. And right now, you can get 50% off your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/OTC. Oh, and there's.
I think that's a good thing to have, man, considering the fact, like, just using that when it comes to dating. You know what I mean? Like, 2 of the people that was in his basement were 2 women that he was supposed to be dating. One he had down there, you know, for 10 years since the year 2015. So I'm telling you, these days, man, this world getting sick I'm telling you, times again diabolical. You're gonna have to. You can't just go out for a nice coffee date no more. You really got to do background checks on people.
One person that's reported that she had been held captive since 2015. And I think anybody, we would think if someone didn't show up for work for a day, that they might get a phone call from an employer or a family member. But we've seen in these cases where someone disappears for a period of time. Like, it's happened before. Like, how is it that someone can fall through the cracks for so long, and then it leads to this point where it's like, oh my gosh, here they are 10 years later in a basement in Lancaster, South Carolina?
Yeah, I think sometimes, Chris, I have to remind myself, not everyone has that same type of relationship with their family and friends like I do. I come from a very tight-knit family. I talk to my parents once a day, if not every other day. I mean, we're tight-knit. But it's important to remember not everyone, has that type of relationship with friends and family. So I think when you're, in a relationship with a narcissistic person like this individual was, you can start playing mind games. Look, that's a form of domestic violence. It's a domestic abuse is exactly what it is. So that's why it is important, you see these early warning signs, even if it's an acquaintance or a coworker, and you start seeing some of these early warning signs, don't dismiss it. Right. I think it's important that we report things to authorities, that we see concerning behavior. There's no way you're going to tell me that this went on for 10 years, and I get it. Look, Lancaster's very rural. It's out in the middle of nowhere, really. So the idea that you're in a busy neighborhood, I don't know, obviously, but there had to have been tall tale signs that something was off in this house.
And when you respond to an unattended death, because that's how this started, is someone, maybe it was the suspect, Donnie Birchfield in this case, he calls because there's a dead body in his home. But as a sheriff's deputy, if you're going and you're responding to this, what are you looking for where your radar's up, where, wait a second, this isn't just, I don't know if they were elderly, but someone who just died in the home. There's something a lot more that's going on here.
Well, it's all, I think it's also case specific. There's been plenty of times of natural deaths I've, responded to when I was a deputy where, maybe it was an elderly person or a person that was dying of cancer. There are situations where if I come in and there's a decedent in the house, if I can get the doctor, if we contact the doctor or EMS contacts the doctor, a lot of times, if a doctor will sign off on the death certificate, you don't even have to have the coroner or investigators come out because, hey, look, this X, Y, and Z person, has had terminal illness for a long period of time. I'll sign off on that death certificate. But, when I come in and there's multiple people, I'm going to kind of gauge the environment, right? Or did this sick individual manipulate these people so much where they played off on it as well? So looking around, was there signs of struggle? Does it look like a true natural death? What are the living conditions like inside this residence? Talking to the suspect, was he the primary caregiver? What can we find out? So you really got to start very basic, Chris, and then start to build and ask the right questions. I think is probably the right way to go about this.
I think of some other cases where there are these allegations that someone's been held against their will for an extended period of time. And I think on the outside, when you think of what that would look like, and we don't have pictures of what it did look like in the basement, he's accused of physical abuse of these victims as well. But, you think of like someone chained up like medieval time style, against a wall. But we've seen in a lot of cases where law enforcement will say that's not exactly how it works. I mean, typically what does in these cases the evidence need to be to prove that someone was being held against their will?
Yeah, obviously times where, like we saw in this case, where that he is removing access to cell phones, emails, internets, ways for these people to communicate. Basically, like you said, it doesn't take someone being chained up or duct taped like we see in the movie. This isn't a Liam Neeson movie. It can be the form of psychological intimidation, telling this person, hey, if you want to eat, if you want your medication, if you want a place to live, you're going to do what I tell you to do. It's pure narcissistic manipulation of all it is, but it is a form of kidnapping in and of itself because you're keeping these people against their will and preventing them from talking. And in fact, it's also a form of domestic abuse. In South Carolina, if you remove, take a phone from a spouse or a domestic partner, that is a form of domestic violence. And so again, there's more to it than the guy with the big jacket holding you and tying you up in your basement.
And he makes a great point with not everybody has family and people that's looking for them. For somebody to fall in the cracks for 10 years, I mean, you got somebody that's vulnerable. I mean, who would they call? Nobody's even looking for them, man. It's been 10 years and nobody even tried to find you. Nobody worried about you or where you was at. I mean, I think people think that maybe it does have to look like it's a rope and it's a chain and it's all these things, and it doesn't. It just takes, like I was saying before, take advantage of somebody that's vulnerable, somebody that doesn't have nobody looking out for them, no family and friends, somebody sickly, and you can do that. You could mess with them, and I think the psychological that plays a bigger part than any chain, rope, or handcuffs could.
That it can be psychological as well, which is, I truly believe, is really what was in this case.
So it was around July 25th that the law enforcement responded to this unattended death, and then everything came about. And I believe he was arrested on August 1st. Here we are in September. This story is starting to come to light. But I think of, at least in the case of the individual who was allegedly held since 2015, I mean, how do you go back that far and build a case and try and figure out and piece together a timeline? Because you're not only just doing it for one person. In this situation, you're doing it for 4 people.
Yeah, removing them, now that this sick individual has been arrested, it kind of gives those victims a little bit more breathing room and peace of mind. Obviously, I would want a forensic type of counselor or psychiatrist in there to kind of first get these people to where.
I don't care what nobody say. I see plenty of pictures of people with their dogs, and I at least get to see the dog look happy. The dog never look happy with him.
We can talk to them, because imagine just the brutal and the mind games that have been played with these people for all this time. I mean, we're going on 10 years on some of the people that were found in this residence. So can you imagine? Look, we have seen this time, and I say time and time again, there's been numerous cases where that have gotten national attention, where kids were stored or the locks in their residence were flipped backwards so they didn't have access. So once I can get these people some breathing room and let them know this monster is in jail, you are safe, that kind of, their guard starts to come down a little bit and they feel more free talking about it. Look, again, there's a lot, Chris, we don't know about this case. Could it have been something where he was feeding this person? Was there a substance abuse issue where they were basically feeding the victim drugs to stay there? We see this a lot in sex trafficking and some of these, prostitution cases where the pimp's basically feeding the dope habit, and in order to feed the dope habit, you have to go out here and pimp yourself out. So there's different ways to do that, but separating them from that suspect is first, and getting some professional counselors in there to kind of take the tension out of the air and let them know this is a safe environment.
And of the charges he's facing right now, there is abuse of a vulnerable adult is the term that's being used in South Carolina, because we don't know the victims in terms of, we know that there was 2 women who he was in some sort of romantic relationship with, and then there was a couple, a husband and a wife, that he was considered the sole provider for, and that seems very vague, but they're all considered vulnerable adults. Like, legally, what does that actually mean?
Chris, a vulnerable adult by the law in South Carolina means a person 18 years of age or older who has a physical or mental condition which substantially impairs the person from adequately providing for his or her own care or protection. So any type of person that may stay in a facility, a long-term memory care facility, that is what's going to kind of meet those guidelines.
Yeah, and because I also just think too, I mean, because he's in pictures with family members on social media. It's been reported that his dad is a pastor in a small community. I mean, a Baptist preacher that people know in the community. I mean, and I don't know what their relationship is or, how often they were together. But from a law enforcement standpoint, not only are you kind of piecing together the stories of each of these 4 people, but you have to think at some point somebody saw something. And I mean, what type of charges, I'm not saying for the dad, I'm just saying generally speaking, if people knew that there were people inside this home, I mean, how do you go about figuring out whether someone else could be involved in this?
Yeah, so obviously we could have conspiracy charges. or hindering investigation charges. If you knew and you didn't report that, you're just as sick as this individual is. So again, that's where in this investigation, I promise you, they are diving into cell phone records, digital media to see exactly who knew, who was communicating with this person. Obviously, we are reading now a lot that the suspect was, financial crimes, taking advantage. First of all, this is the, two things I've always said. You don't mess with a child. You don't mess with an old person. You want to piss me off. That's the two best ways to do it. I've got no sympathy for someone like this who is taking advantage of these vulnerable people financially, mentally, sexually. Who knows what's going to come out from this investigation? But this is where diving into that forensic evidence and doing a lot of interviews with neighbors, friends, and families is hopefully going to shed a lot of light as to, how did we get here? How did we get to this place that we're at today? What was the relationship? How did he know these two elderly people in the residence? There's still a lot of questions out there. And that's why I think it's important that we wait till this full investigation is fully transpired before we, I don't like giving my hearsay on things until a lot more is out.
For sure. And I think, in terms of what we were told by the local police that they're expecting or saying more charges could come. Obviously, there's an investigation, a lot of questions about that. The financial crimes part is interesting. And you talk about getting fired up because it was noted that he used, I think it was $2,000 off a credit card to go buy stuff at Walmart only for himself. Like police were very clear. Like it's not like he was going to get things for the people in the house, and $11,000 to pay off credit card stuff that he had going on. And it seems like in some of these cases too, not only do you have the abuse, but then as you're piecing together a case against somebody, this is someone who only cared about himself.
Yeah, look, there's so many scams that go on aside from this case, right? These people that call on the elderly to take advantage of them, say, "Hey, listen, you missed jury duty. You have a warrant for your arrest. Put money on a Visa or a green dot card, send it to me." They prey on the vulnerable, and so again, this guy wouldn't have done this to a normal, day-to-day hardworking individual that's smart enough to pick up on it. So that's what really frustrates me and takes it to a totally different level. The word vulnerable. All right. And so, again, they go after the people who are easy targets. So and this is important. If you have family members in these assisted living facilities, retirement homes, you have caregivers in and out of the house, do your research, do background checks. Listen, I was blessed to have both my grandparents lived well into their mid-90s. And we had home health care in there, amazing ladies that sat with them. But we also did our due diligence on running background checks on these people before they had access to, my grandmother's purse and all this, personal information that's in there. I think it's important, family and friends of people who have loved ones in these facilities, is just to make sure that you're doing your research on their financial situation, monitoring their bank accounts. And if something is suspicious, we need to act immediately.
And lastly, going back to the fact that in South Carolina, psychological abuse is something that the law recognizes. It doesn't just have to be, and he is accused of the physical abuse as well. But how do you, as you're putting a case together, because I could see the defense attorney, and there's actually one case we've been covering out of Connecticut. Her name's Kimberly Sullivan. She's accused of keeping her stepson captive inside the house for 20 years. And the defense attorney argues, where's the locks on the doors?
Hey, that's the lady. Remember, I brought her up earlier when I said I heard about the stepmom who left the son in there for 2 decades. That's her right there. That's what she looked like. That's her. And he was able to finally get free because one day he said he made a fire in the house, and the firefighters came and stuff and got him. And he definitely couldn't do too much. I mean, she's an older woman, but she had starved him to the point where he couldn't do much of anything. She had got him to the point where he was way underweight, like just bones and skin, But yeah, that's her right there.
She's not accused of any sort of physical abuse, but he's pushing back on any idea of psychological abuse. How do you put a case together with evidence that psychological abuse was happening that you'd be able to present to a jury?
Yeah, honestly, Chris, it's going back to those forensic interviews and those forensic counselors getting in there and because we see this a lot in like domestic abuse cases, right? The spouse, and let's just say females for right now, because obviously most domestic abuse happens to females. I get it happens to men too, but when you have manipulated someone for so long into thinking you're not going to have a roof over your head anymore, I'm going to take your car away from you, I'm going to leverage the children, I'm going to leverage all these things, you feel almost like helpless. You feel like I have to bow down and do whatever, this individual is telling me to do, or I'm going to lose my livelihood. I'm going to lose my kids. Or worst case scenario, if I leave this person, it's going to turn out to be in a situation where this person comes back to kill me. So I can understand it when you have been warped and all the mind games have been played for so many years. People are hesitant to come forward. They're scared, and that's okay. So putting them in an environment and getting the right type of counseling in there to open up these doors and to work through the scars. Imagine the counseling that these individuals are going to need to be in for the rest of their lives after living in such a hard situation, in a demented situation for so long. So, Chris, I want to say this one more time. I talked about this last week, actually, when I was up in New York, when I joined Jesse on Sidebar. If you are in an abusive relationship, you need to get out. I second that. I said it last week. South Carolina is always one of the top leaders in the country for deaths and injuries to women in domestic situations. Whether it is a domestic abuse type of relationship, or you've got a loved one living in a situation with a caregiver that's not taking, good care, family, friends, step up to the plate, notify the authorities, and we owe it to that innocent person to get them in a living condition that is safe and where they are being taken care of.
No, that's incredibly well put. And, I think in putting this story together, as much as it's like, wow, I can't believe this would happen, like we've been able to share situations where it has happened before.
Sure.
I even think back, I was just thinking now of, I forget the name, I'm blanking on it, but the story out of Cleveland of those girls inside the house like years ago who came out. We just see these stories time and time again. They're incredibly shocking. Chad Ayers, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for helping us break this one down.
Chris, thanks again. Look forward to the next one.
That will do.
Okay. Woo! It's just so intense. I knew it though. That's what I was saying before. I was like, he's taking advantage of vulnerable people. And when you see him, he looks socially awkward, like he doesn't fit in, but you don't see like violent when you look at him. Now this leads us into the motive. So why did he do it? The motive appears to be a mix of financial exploitation and psychological domination. Birchfield allegedly told one girlfriend she should fear for her life and that he knew how to dispose of a body from past experiences. That's not just manipulation, it's terror. Okay. Now, and it also suggests that this wasn't a one-time lapse. It was a calculated system of control. All right. Now let's talk about legacy. Birchfield is the son of a Baptist pastor. That detail matters, not because faith is to blame, but because it adds to a layer of betrayal. Now I'm about to bring up another video, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, the title of this video is Neighbor Shocked to Hear Lancaster Man Allegedly Held 4 People Hostage. It is from Queen City News. That is the channel where I am getting this video from, Queen City News. Okay. All right. And according to this video, according to this video, it captures the community's disbelief. People trusted this family. They believed in their values, and now they're left wondering how darkness grew in a house of light. Because it wasn't a house of light. It was a house of darkness. That's why. And go back to what I say, man, you be so shocked. You can't judge a book by its cover. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You just don't know.
A Lancaster County man is in jail accused of holding people against their will in his basement. Police also say he used their credit cards to buy things for himself and pay his debts. Thanks for joining us. At 10, I'm Brian Blakely for Queen City News. Police say they did not learn what was going on until one of the captive victims died. Neighbors tell South Carolina Bureau Chief Shakira Speaks they're still trying to understand what was going on just down their road.
Donnie Birchfield Jr.'s charges range from financial crimes to neglect and domestic violence to false imprisonment. And reports show that he held up to 4 people against their will in his basement, not allowing anyone to leave or have communication with loved ones.
This is a quiet area. This is a quiet neighborhood. And I was shocked to have anything happen.
In July, Lancaster police investigating a death say they discovered 4 people being held against their will in Donnie Birchfield Jr.'s family basement. Officers arrested him in August, charging him with 16 charges, including financial identity fraud, false imprisonment, aggravated domestic violence, and 4 counts of abuse of vulnerable adults.
And just to think that this was going on right around the corner from our house, right around the corner from the park, right around the corner. And there are other children. It's not just mine.
Warrants state Birchfield Jr. used victims' bank information and credit cards for his own financial gain. Other documents allege Birchfield was in a romantic relationship with one of the female victims who claimed she was held against her will since November 2015. Investigators say he prevented victims from going to the bathroom without his permission, wouldn't feed them, and prevented them from contacting loved ones. He's also accused of choking one victim so long she lost consciousness. Then someone in the home died, and officers say it wasn't reported until the following day. Officials say more charges could be on the way.
There are a lot of different things that have gone on that now, while they may not be directly related, they do tend to make a little more sense.
Yeah. Christy Barnes has been one of Birchfield's neighbors for more than 10 years. She says she never interacted much with the father and sons, but called the mother and daughter nice people.
Feeling that human aspect of it, I feel terrible for all the families involved, individuals involved in the things that everybody's going through.
Lancaster police are still investigating, and the coroner's office is still working through the cause of death. In Lancaster, Shakira Speaks, Queen City News.
Queen City News.
Okay. So the neighbors say they never suspected a thing. And I think this just shows how close this horror was to everyday life, right? A quiet street, a park nearby, and beneath it all, a basement of secrets. This isn't just about one man. It's about how silence and isolation can hide unspeakable truths. Where were the safeguards? Did anybody report concerns? Were there missed opportunities to intervene? The victims were classified as vulnerable adults, people who rely on others for care, and yet they were allegedly abused for years. This case demands scrutiny, not just of Birchfield, but of the systems that failed to protect. Okay. Now I found another video, and it's from the Law and Crime Network, and the title of this video is House of Horror Captivity Case Deepens with Surprise Second Arrest. So they said it's a second arrest. So we're going to see what that means. I haven't watched this. I just seen it while recording this video. And so I'm going to play it. I got to see this. And I think just more and more stuff is going to come out. So I got to make sure I continue to follow this case. I do believe more stuff is going to come out. Before I play this, please, if you're watching the video live or on replay, thumbs it up. Put me in the algorithm. It's a free way to help me out. Don't cost you no money. Of course, if you're watching this live, you just double tap your screen. That's all. And subscribe if you like the content. You want to come back and see me, do that. Hit that notification bell.
Risky behavior.
Yeah, let's get into this.
The plot is thickening, and we have new questions about what happened inside this South Carolina home. This video per WSOC TV. This man is a pastor's son who's accused of holding 4 people captive inside the basement of his house over the span of a decade. And we're now learning about a man allegedly trapped in that house, what his sister is saying about the years she searched for him. And we have a potential bombshell in this case, as a woman seen kissing the suspect in pictures seems to have been arrested on the same day as the suspect at the same house. We have a lot to unpack. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see.
Imagine searching for a loved one for years, not knowing where they went, filing a missing persons report even, and nothing comes up until you find out that they were allegedly held against their will inside of a house in the town where you live. That is the reality, reportedly, for a woman in Lancaster, South Carolina, who says that her brother is one of the 4 people held captive inside a house there. I'll get more to what she had to say in just a moment. Now, a woman told WSOC TV that her brother is one of the people who is trapped inside this house. She said that she had been searching for her brother for years and she couldn't find him. She even filed a missing persons report. She says he has a developmental disability, but he lived on his own until a few years ago when he disappeared. She said when she was reunited with him after Birchfield was arrested, she said her brother looked to weigh about 70 pounds less. Certainly what we know thus far, the allegations, they're horrific. Allegations that 4 people were held against their will, physically abused inside this house about an hour south of Charlotte in the small town of Lancaster, South Carolina. This again video per WSOC TV. Now, 2 of them, 2 alleged victims, reportedly a husband and wife. The 2 others were allegedly romantically involved with the man who is now facing more than a dozen charges in this case. We've learned that there may be more than one person facing charges who lived in this home. And there may be someone who is dating the suspect, Donnie Ray Birchfield. Now, I'll break down what we know at this point about whether the failure to report abuse charge that woman is facing is connected to the house of horror that Birchfield is accused of creating in his home in just a moment. But to understand that, we really have to get into the timeline of what we know at this point. A lot of information coming from law enforcement, as well as arrest warrants that were obtained by the local media outlet, the Post and Courier. So this story starts on July 25th, when police in Lancaster, South Carolina, again about an hour south of Charlotte, got a call about an unattended death inside Birchfield's home. Now you can see in the WSOC TV video that it looks like a very average home, a very average neighborhood in this community. According to the warrants that were obtained by the Post and Courier, police determined that the woman who they responded to for this unattended death, that she had actually died a day prior to them being called to Birchfield's home. They say there was also evidence that the victim was physically denied food, water, and medical treatment. This was just the beginning, though, of what law enforcement said they found inside Birchfield's home. They said there were 3 other people there, and police say they were allegedly being held captive by this man. Now, publicly, we know that Birchfield is the son of a prominent Baptist minister in this small town. And we also found several pictures of Birchfield on social media of him and his family. He seems like he was a really big fan of pro wrestling. He's at a lot of those events. Very normal stuff.
I wonder how it is affecting his family. I wonder will they do like a press conference or something like that. Because I do wonder, I think that in the last video, they mentioned the family, some of them saying, you know, hey, let's not get too caught up. These are just allegations. But they did not specify who that was speaking. But I know it would have to be, you know, difficult for the father, you know, him being a pastor. When Sunday come and you up there preaching, you know what's on everybody's mind. If they come back to the church. You know what I mean? Not like the father did this, but for some people, they might feel uncomfortable coming there. It's just awkward, you know, knowing that your son is being accused of this horrible act, holding people hostage in the basement. Some people are going to wonder, did you know about this and not say nothing? They're also going to wonder, are you backing him up? which as a parent, you know, you do support your kid. Not that you agree with what they did, but you may show up in some capacity to maybe make sure they have a lawyer and stuff like that, and you know, just to see what things are going to happen. You know, a lot of times people don't just abandon people when they did something horrible. I've seen a lot of cases like that. Very few people turn their backs on their family, but you know, it puts as a pastor of the community, it puts you in a very awkward position with you and the community, knowing that your son is being accused of this.
Social media. Now, the newspaper reports, as far as what was going on inside the house, that the husband of the woman who died was also being held captive along with two women who Birchfield was romantically involved with. Now, police said that Birchfield was the sole provider of the husband and wife, and it's unclear how he knew them. Now, a woman told WSOC TV that her brother is one of the people who is trapped inside this house. She said that she had been searching for her brother for years and she couldn't find him. She even filed a missing persons report. She says he has a developmental disability, but he lived on his own until a few years ago when he disappeared. She said when she was reunited with him after Birchfield was arrested, she said her brother looked to weigh about 70 pounds less. Now, as far as the two women who were allegedly in some kind of romantic relationship with Birchfield, police say one was in the house since September of last year, the other since 2015. We are talking about a span of a decade, according to law enforcement. Now, we dove into this a little bit more, trying to figure out people who Donnie Ray Birchfield was allegedly connected to. And we found two Facebook accounts of women who have pictures with Birchfield, and they appear to be, at least at one point, romantically involved with him. There's one account of a woman with pictures of Birchfield that go back to roughly 2019. It appears she and Birchfield, they would go to a lot of pro wrestling events. Her most recent post, though, was of herself outside on September 19th of this year. It's a picture of her outside in a cemetery. Now, the other account appears to show a woman currently romantically involved with Birchfield. The woman posted a picture that appears to show Birchfield kissing her on the forehead on June 12th, about a month and a half before police responded to the house for the suspicious death. Now, it is unclear if either of these women are alleged victims of what Birchfield is accused of doing, but we did put their names into the South Carolina court database. And the woman with the most recent pictures of her kissing with Birchfield, they came back showing that she was arrested on August 1st. And the address listed for where this woman was arrested, the same house on Churchill Road in Lancaster, South Carolina, where Birchfield is accused of holding 4 people captive. Now, Birchfield was arrested at that same address, and according to court records, on the same day. The woman is facing a charge of abuse, failure to report abuse, neglect of vulnerable adults. According to online court records, she posted a $2,000 surety bond on August 11th. Now, Birchfield is facing 16 charges, including 2 counts of abuse of a vulnerable adult, 4 counts of false imprisonment, 2 counts of domestic violence, high and aggravated nature, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and 3 counts of exploitation of a vulnerable adult. He is being held on a $150,000 bond, and records show that his case was also filed on August 11th, the same date as the woman who, according to those records, was arrested at his house on the same day that he was. Now, I'm not naming that woman at this point because we just don't know enough about her and the circumstances surrounding her arrest. It's also unclear if law enforcement sees her as a victim in this case. We need to pause in this episode of On the Case and bring you a law and crime legal alert because there are allegations claiming that online apps DraftKings and FanDuel are engineered for addiction. These multi-billion-dollar companies allegedly continue to put profit over safety. Every free bet, every boosted parlay, and every small payout triggers a dopamine rush that creates dependency and turns harmless fun into a detrimental habit. They keep you hooked, chasing impossible wins, and trap you in a cycle that can lead to significant financial loss and ultimately damage mental health. Our legal sponsors are taking on the online gambling industry to potentially get compensation for all of those impacted. So if you or a loved one has suffered addiction, financial hardship, or mental health issues due to sports betting apps, visit gamblinglawsuit.com/OTC to take a short quiz and check your eligibility to file a claim. I did reach out.
That's crazy. I didn't know they could. I didn't know they would be working on something like that where you could sue people because you gamble. That's crazy. I have to do some more research into that. What kind of software is that they would be held liable because of somebody else wanting to bet and wanting to gamble? Wow. Also, I'm very curious about this woman. Is she one of the 4 women? Is she the one that's been there over a decade and maybe was thought to be a victim, but now they're thinking maybe she's not a victim? Wow, this is crazy. I hope, oh man, I hope more information comes out about this. Oh, but I can tell they're very unsure because they don't, they're not going to say the name and stuff like that for fear that they could further victimize this individual,
To police in Lancaster, South Carolina to see if there was any information they could give me on this woman. And they told me they're not releasing more information for now on this case, but they are planning to do a release in conjunction with the South Carolina Attorney General's office. And they also said that it is still a very active investigation. Now, here's what we know about the alleged abuse that happened inside the home. These are more specifics. According to police, Birchfield kept the 4 people in the basement of the house, and they were only allowed to leave when he let them. Birchfield also controlled the victims' cell phones, stopping them from calling for help. He also allegedly controlled when victims would eat and use the bathroom. Physically, police say that Birchfield abused the victims, including strangling them. One woman allegedly told police that Birchfield threatened to kill her and her family, and that he knew how to get rid of a body from past experience. Then, since 2021, police allege that Birchfield used the couple's credit and debit cards, the husband and wife, to pay for at least $2,000 to buy items online from Walmart, 32 transactions, in fact, all for himself. He also allegedly nearly spent $12,000 of that couple's money over the first 8 months of this year to pay off multiple credit cards. We've learned that Birchfield is the son of a Baptist pastor in Lancaster. And again, he was a huge fan of pro wrestling, it seems. His social media shows him with several wrestlers. And I bring that up because this picture is sadly ironic when you see a chain around his neck. But what we're talking about, this isn't some gimmick or storyline. This is real life, real accusations that he caused a lot of harm to the 4 people allegedly held captive inside his home. There is, though, at least one person who appears to some extent to be in his corner after this story's come to light. His sister posted on social media, quote, "Before you share or repost anything about my family, please stop and put yourself in our place. What if it were your son, your brother, or your friend being gossiped about and judged online? Spreading speculation, repeating unverified claims, and adding commentary only causes more harm. It's not helping anyone." Now, again,
well, I would ask her to do the same thing. Put yourself in the shoes of the victims. Okay. And one could say that to you.
it's true. We have not heard Birchfield's side to the story, and more questions seem to be piling up in the days since this story first came to light. And it's unclear if there's any chance that all of this is some big misunderstanding. It's also unclear how the woman in his home died. It's unclear how someone allegedly could be held captive for a decade, and for all of this to take place without someone reaching out about the victims. We do know that Donnie Birchfield could face more charges beyond what he's facing as we speak. Birchfield is facing a total of 16 charges. I reached out to his attorney and received this statement, quote, "My office is currently investigating this matter. My client maintains his innocence in this case, and it is important to remember that he is presumed innocent of these allegations. We look forward to litigating this case in the court system where facts, evidence, and the rule of law matter. We will have no further comment at this time." I also reached out to the attorney listed for the woman facing a charge who was arrested at Birchfield's home. We have yet to hear back at the time of this recording. Join us now to talk more about this is criminal defense attorney Sky Lazaro. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Law and Crime. Just such a shocking case with just the allegations that law enforcement has laid out thus far. What stands out to you about how this could play out when it comes to the court case and all the proceedings moving forward?
You know, it's really early in the case right now. Obviously, charges have just been filed and he's been arrested on the charges. His attorney, we saw, issued a statement maintaining his innocence. These cases are not always as clear cut as maybe they initially seem, in terms of, when the defense starts putting together an investigation and, essentially their take on what went on, whether or not this was voluntary, at least to begin with, or came, started out in a good place. And here we ended up, somewhere that is seemingly criminal, or at least allegedly criminal.
Right. Yeah, because I do think like the clear cut part of it, because there are cases that I remember the story out of Cleveland where it was, those women trapped in a house, and then there was this, kind of heroic rescue. And then there's other cases where they might have been in a relationship and people had seen them out and about. I'm not saying in specifics of this case, but it seems like sometimes it's not like, the medieval times chained to a wall and it was just like that for 10 years. I mean, how does the prosecution and defense navigate that reality? And let's start with the prosecution side of it. How do you paint a picture that even if it started as voluntary, it went to a place that was criminal?
Really, what the prosecution is going to have to do is be really good about laying out why these were vulnerable adults and how he essentially took advantage of them or kept them in the home for this period of time. They're alleging he used debit cards for personal expenses, those types of things. But these vulnerable adult cases really seem to turn on why were they vulnerable? Was there mental health problems? Was there some sort of disability? Was he taking disability checks from them? Was that, the reason he was doing this? So I really think the prosecution is going to have to, really piece together a case of controlled coercion or something along those lines where people couldn't leave because he was controlling their money, something like that. Because I don't think this is a case where he kept them chained in, but these were also seemingly people who weren't given medical care that it sounds like needed it, at least from, early reporting on the case. So I think they're going to have to really lay out, what was wrong with these, or not wrong, but, what ailments do these individuals have? How did he take advantage of them? How did he, keep them trapped or contained in this home for 10 years?
Well, because that's the part of it as well, where I know through the woman who says it was her brother who was in the house, that she said that he was living independently on his own, but he had some sort of learning disability, which would make him a vulnerable adult, and thus the charge that we've seen there. But if this were to go to trial, and we know his attorney has said his client maintained his innocence to this point, how do you build testimony when it comes to someone who may not be able to testify on the stand because maybe they have a learning disability or some sort of mental ailment that would hurt their ability to testify in an open court?
That can come in through other witnesses, his sister who's, been looking, she knows his history. It can come in through medical expert testimony if they have people, these people assessed to say, okay, this is, what they have, if they were getting Social Security disability, things like that can all come in as, it's not really even circumstantial evidence, but, collateral evidence to support that, this person, was a vulnerable adult and, could have been easily manipulated or controlled or, somehow coerced. It doesn't sound like they were chained up and not allowed to leave. So, I'm kind of assuming that some of what we might see in this is there was some financial control going on where he just didn't give them access. And, if this brother had been missing for a while, maybe this was a place to live where he had friends,
Well, and that's, thinking as a criminal defense attorney, because I know, and we received a statement from his attorney. I mean, that's not an easy job when you have someone who's accused of crimes like this, and definitely in a way where, I mean, you just read the headline and you're like 10 years. How is that even possible? Mm-hmm. And then you're representing this person. We don't know. Part of this too is law enforcement isn't releasing much more than what we already have. So there's a little bit of evidence that we have, but there's still I feel like I have just so many questions that I would have for law enforcement when they're ready to speak more about it. But as a criminal defense attorney, and especially in a small community like this, everybody knows the story, everybody's seen the headlines. How do you approach this case to try and defend your client? I mean, if it's in this county, you would have to think it would be a really difficult place to try this case, knowing what the allegations are.
Right. And these are generally cases that are really sympathetic for juries. Your victims in these cases are extremely sympathetic most of the time, and they're tough cases from the defense side. But this is a small town, and I think they interviewed some of the neighbors that didn't seem to think anything was amiss or going wrong. And so, that to me, unless these people never saw the light of day and nobody had a clue that they were in the home, you'd think if the neighbors thought that this gentleman was exploiting them or controlling them or stealing their money or keeping them trapped there, that somebody would have said something. And maybe it does come out that they just nobody knew they were there and they were never allowed to leave the house. I think from a defense standpoint, I know he said his investigation is ongoing, which is, the best he can say right now. And they're probably going to have to do quite a bit of interviewing, but you hope to be able to piece together something that puts your client in a positive light where he was trying to help people. We see these sort of unsanctioned group homes all the time where, there'll be a sober living house, or it'll be, some sort of other place for people who, have learning disabilities, but can function pretty well on their own, but they'll live in a home, with a group of other people, and so hopefully he can, I think probably his best argument is, it started out as something like that. And maybe he got carried away on the expenditures or got out of hand and it got to be more than he could handle medically, things along those lines. I mean, that's really the kind of case you've got to put together. Is it can't be they probably weren't there, because we know they were there. So you have to have a better explanation.
You touched on this a little bit because he's facing these charges related to financial crimes, and they accuse him of spending $11,000 to pay off credit cards, using this couple who are considered vulnerable, 2 of the 4 people, the husband and wife, using their money. And then it was about like $2,000 in stuff that he bought at Walmart, which police said was just for himself. Those crimes in and of themselves, I would assume you'd be able to prove with some financial statements, and all of that. But when it comes to piecing together the entire picture for the prosecution and showing that this was not voluntary, they'll say that these were people being held against their will. How do those financial transactions factor in beyond just those financial charges that he's facing?
So I've had this case, or cases very similar to that, where I've defended individuals who were the caretaker for someone. And it went on for years and years and years. And there were the same similar allegations because the credit card was used to buy things. My client said, look, she told us that, or he told us that we could, so it was, a gift, things like that. I think there's always more to these. And look, this very well may be a case where he just kept people locked in the basement. I don't know that we know really what was going on, but in some of these vulnerable adult cases, what we do see are these long-standing relationships where they really did care for the people. There was no other family around, and it wasn't until the person passed away or some other family member got involved that decided they wanted to be part of it that somebody goes to the police and makes a report. And so the financial transactions could very well be, authorized, completely benign. I think a lot of that is stuff that will, need to be uncovered probably by the defense. And diving into this case is, did he just take the debit card and go use it for his own use and not for the benefit of them, or purchase things at Walmart for them? Or, did they okay it? And if they're vulnerable adults, were they capable of okaying it, from a mental capacity?
Because I also wonder, there's just kind of this overall question for me with this story too, especially because I believe it's unclear for the couple how long it's that they were believed to be held against their will, according to the police. Two of the women, the romantic partners, one was in the house in September of last year, and then you have this person from 2015. And everybody's got different family situations. And it's sad in some cases that people can fall through the cracks, and we've seen it in a lot of ways. I'm sure in your work, you've seen it as well. But how is it that someone could vanish for 10 years, be in this house, be allowed only with the help or with being allowed by the suspect, Donnie Birchfield, according to police? How do these cases happen? Because as shocking as it is, I feel like it's not the first time we've seen cases like this.
Sadly, I think this probably happens more than we realize. And how it happens, I think, is a tough question to answer. You know, everybody's family dynamics are different. I can say for myself, if my sister went missing, I would not just be like, oh, I wonder where she's at. You know, I'd probably go looking. Right. But, you know, everybody's different and everybody's dynamics are different and life experiences are different. And unfortunately, you know, we have a society where there are people who will take advantage of people, you know, who are vulnerable. And I think unless somebody sees something, a neighbor sees something and says something, or, you know, that starts getting investigated by some like Social Security or something like that, you know, really, how would anybody know if nobody went looking for him and there was no red flags, you know, on what the defendant in this case was doing? It's sad, but I think this actually happens more often than we realize.
Right. No. And again, like, I mean, there's so many examples that we can bring up of cases like this, which is just terrifying to think about. But also I think of the neighbors too, where it's like, I mean, I think of my neighbors and I don't know all of them. And you could tell me that something was happening in their house. And it's like, you see something, say something, but it's like, at what point would you ever expect anybody would actually do this? And we'll see, you know, how these charges play out. There's a big question at this point about the woman who died. How did she die? They said it seemed like she had been malnourished in some capacity, so that could impact the charges. But at this point, he's facing $150,000 bond. And I know each state is different when it comes to bonds, but he's facing 16 pretty serious charges. What does that amount of bond, I mean, how do you read into bond amounts and what that means for the allegations as we're kind of waiting for more information to come out?
Yeah, every state is different in how their bail and bond statute is set up. Like, for example, Utah got rid of monetary bail for the most part. So they either hold you with no bail or release you, which is worse in a lot of ways. Yeah. But $150,000 bail really is not a high bail in terms of somebody being able to bail out. I mean, if it's bondable, you get a bail bondsman, you pay 10% of that, right? And you can be released on bail. I think $150,000 is probably significant enough to secure someone coming back to court, so they're not on the hook for $150,000, right? But it's not, you know, it's not the like $1 million bails that we see, you know, in some of the, or $2 million and whatever it is in some of these murder cases. I think what courts look at in setting bail or bond amounts is, you know, are there ways that we can supervise this person if they post bail, or are they so dangerous that we need to keep them locked up and not release them pending trial? And what's a significant or significant enough amount to secure that someone is going to show back up in court? And so I think $150,000 is reasonable. But I also think it probably also, I mean, these are serious charges. But I don't think the state is so concerned that he's a public safety risk that they didn't propose a bond that was attainable.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I'm not sure about his financial situation. I mean, I believe it's a public defender who's representing him. So if you're thinking like $1,500, you know, would that be to get out? But you know, there's just so many questions I have about this case. Law enforcement, they've only released so much. We'll see what happens. I know the state attorney general in South Carolina is involved in this. So We'll see how this case moves forward. Sky Lazaro, criminal defense attorney. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube.
Seemingly criminal, or at least allegedly criminal.
All right, and there we have it. There we have it. There we have it. Now, so what do we take away from this? Evil does not always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile, lives next door, and quotes scripture. Donnie Ray Birchfield Jr. is facing 16 charges and the investigation is ongoing. But justice isn't just about courtrooms. It's about awareness, prevention, and accountability. If you see something, say something, because silence is the accomplice of abuse. This has been Risky Behavior ENT. I am Mr. Diabolical himself. Stay curious, stay bold, and never stop asking what's really going on beneath the surface. Thank you for tuning in. Thumbs up, share this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I am out, and I will see you later with another Diabolical Risky News. Until later, peace.
Risky behavior.